Hello everyone and welcome back. We've been doing our FRQ review. That is largely because this year's a little bit different. No multiple choice section, just FRQs, and they tell us two questions on array or array list and another one on methods and control structures. One of the things I think is telling is if you look at the units, those last three units not covered. Right, so you will not have an FRQ on 2D arrays or inheritance. There never was going to be one on recursion. But one of the things that's kind of omitted here, this specifically says array/array list. This says methods and control structures, but we know it's over units 1 through 7, and someone in here is strings. So I would still be prepared to do strings. You can use an IDE this year. They say you won't have an advantage. I would use one. I would think the disadvantage may be like a time thing, like maybe your words per minute is terrible, and so you can't type as fast as it maybe you can write or think it. But I would think an IDE would be pretty good. So what I have is from 2013, question one. This one is dealing with strings, and I think we're going to see that it's also dealing with array list. And this one's a little bit different because we're dealing with download info objects. So let's get started. Guys, Friday's stream was crazy. The Battleship AI thing was really awesome. Which I think is, yeah, that's what this is going to load into. I should have preloaded my IntelliJ. I didn't know it was going to take this long. Having to make small talk. And we programmers are not good at that, as you can tell. Okay, let's go, buddy. If I cancel, is it going to? Okay. I like to think that RV's code is still running, and that's why. That's why this is taking so long. Sorry, I just saw there. One of the students submitted their file as daddy instead of their name, so there's that. So we'll do file, new project. We're going to go next, and we'll expand. This is under 2013, and I'm just calling this number one because it's question number one from 2013. We'll expand our project folder, right click on the SRC, make a new Java class. Maybe we should read what's happening here. A music website keeps track of downloaded music. We can zoom in, right? Yeah. For each download, the site uses a download info object to store a song's title and number of times it has been downloaded. A partial declaration for the download info class is shown below. So it has a constructor where we take in a title. We have a getter for title, and then we have increment times downloaded, which all it does is increase the number of times downloaded by 1. So we're keeping track of the title and how many times it's been downloaded. A list of downloaded information is stored in a music downloads object. A partial declaration for the music downloads class is shown below. Here there is an instance variable in this class, and it says list. Again, this is some of the older FRQs tended to do this. With list, the only list we know is array list. So if you just treat this like array list, you won't notice the difference. There is an array list of download info. That's these objects up here. And that is called download list. Pay special attention to the name of the instance variable. One way that students tend to mess up is that they look at an example and maybe there is a variable there and they end up using that variable in their code. If you need to refer to the instance variable, make sure you refer to the instance variable. Here we have a constructor, and all it does is set download list to be a new array list. It initializes it. We have get download info. This is going to be implemented in part A, where we take in a string and then we return a download info. Okay, And then part 2, we'll have this up a little. Let's get down into part A. Write the music downloads method getDownloadInfo, which returns a reference to a download info object if an object with a title that matches that parameter title exists in the download list. If no song in download list has a title that matches the parameter title, the method returns null. For example, suppose variable web music A refers to an instance of music downloads and that the table below represents the contents of download list. So we have a music downloads object called web music A, and the instance variable inside that array list, this is the contents. The list contains 3 download info objects. The object at position 0 has the title Hey Jude and has been downloaded 5 times. Try again. The object at position 1 has a title Soul Sister and it's been downloaded 3 times. And the object at position 2 has Aqualung with a download count of 10. Yes, Aqualung is just smashing Hey Jude. The call web music A, that is a music downloads object. Get download info Aqualung returned a reference to the object in position 2 of the list. It's the literal object, a literal download info object. The call web music get download info happy birthday returns null because there's no song called that. Sweet. Let's get started, and we actually need to start with download info, right? I have to write all of this in order to test it. This is called download info. We should be able to copy and paste even the comments. All right, we have our constructor, which was shown. Well, the implementation was not shown. We're going to end up writing it. We have a getter for title. Man, maybe it was easier just to write it ourselves. We have a method that will increment the number of times downloaded. So I'll end up writing all of this so that we have something that's actually usable. In order for us to have a download info, ultimately we need a title. Would we actually do this in a real FRQ? If you want to test it, I doubt you have time. All right, you want to focus on getting the actual methods written, and you just assume that this stuff works. I'm showing it as like a proof of concept type of thing where we can actually plug in their literal examples and see that our stuff works. So if you recall, download info only has 2 pieces of information, a title and number of times downloaded. So I'm going to need to plug in some instance variables which were not shown on the FRQ itself. We're going to have a title, and we're going to have a times downloaded variable. It is an int. Okay. Our constructor is passing in the title for us, so we need to set that. I will do so using this dot notation, which is outside of the subset. But all we're doing is taking this parameter, title. Notice IntelliJ, whenever I highlight this guy, it tells me the associated variable. Right? We're going to take this local variable, this parameter, and save it into my instance variable. Again, notice that IntelliJ is highlighting this to show me what corresponds with what. And the direction is this way we're saving the local variable into the instance variable. Okay, now times downloaded, it just starts out at 0. When we first create the object, it has no times downloaded. Now, technically, we could just leave this off and it will default to 0. That's perfectly fine, but I often like to include it to make sure that that people know. So our get title is just going to return the title, and increment times downloaded is going to take times downloaded and adjust it by 1. That's how this thing works. interesting that that's grayed out. Okay. So now we can actually tackle part A, which we're doing the get download info method. This is part A, right? Yeah. I should get started on this music downloads class. Let's take the partial implementation of that, partial declaration. We're going to copy that bad boy, flip back over to IntelliJ. I'll right click on the SRC, do a new Java class. This is called music. What is it called? Music downloads, obviously. And I'll plug in everything from the FRQ. We have our class header. We were given an instance variable. We see a constructor. We'll fix the red in just a moment. We just need to import is all. I can probably do a better job on formatting that. I was having a problem copying and pasting using Chrome, and Firefox seems to have no issues. Oh my gosh. Yeah. How hard could this method be? All right, we'll fix formatting here like as we go. So music downloads is the object that is going to basically just hold a list, an array list of download info. Now this is mad at me because it's not imported. On the FRQ, you assume everything is imported, but I'll scroll over this, hit Alt-Enter, and IntelliJ will import list for me. Okay, down here in our constructor, we're just setting it to a array list. Again, I'll hover over that, hit Alt-Enter, and now array list is imported. And we're done with that instance variable, we're done with that constructor. This is part A that we're working on. Okay, get download info returns a reference of the download info object with the requested title if it exists. Title is coming in. And we're going to return a reference to the download info object with the title that matches. I'm going to indent this some. If it exists. Null otherwise. Again, that's all part of the return, so I'm going to indent that. This post condition, let's take it back now, y'all. No changes were made to the download list. That's it. Okay, as we're going through and finding this thing, we don't want to actually modify our instance variable. So we have a title. All we really have to do is loop through download list, and with each iteration ask, does the current download info's title match the one that I'm looking for? If so, we found it and we end up returning that. So we can actually use a for each loop here. Now I'm looping through download list. Each individual element is a download info. So I will say for each download info, which we'll refer to as, thank you IntelliJ, download info in download list. All right, here we have a for each loop that is looping through all the elements in our download list. With each iteration, I'm going to ask, is the title of the current download info equal to the one that I'm looking for? Okay, so with that, we would take our download info and ask for the title, right? This is the current element. It is a download info object. I need to pull the title out. This is a download info object. .get title, this is a string. And I want to know, does that string equal the one that I'm looking for, which is title? Okay, so download info object, string, and I want to know, does this string equal some other string? And because those are objects, I'm using the equals method instead of the equals relational operator. If so, that means we have found it. So I need to return the download info object. Well, it's the one that I'm currently on, so I will return the current element, download info. If I manage to go through the whole thing and I never find it, we just simply return null. This is a reserved word in Java. It is the null reference. We didn't find it. It's essentially the null of a download info. Sweet. That's it. That's part A. Do we want to test it? Sure. Let's right click. Let's create our driver. We'll plug in a main method. I need to make some download infos. Let's look at our examples. Right, they give us these examples here. So I will make these objects and add them to an array list. We can actually just do that after we make an array list. I can make a list of download info, doesn't matter what we call it, is equal to a new array list of download info. Now, a couple of things here. I'm going to import in my driver. On the left-hand side here, I'm saying list, and on the right-hand side, I'm saying array list. The only reason I can do this is because array list is an instance of list. Array list is beneath list in a class hierarchy. Now, list is an interface. I can't actually make a list. Right? If I scroll over this, it says it's abstract, cannot be instantiated. The only actual list we know is array list. Another thing I'll kind of highlight is, let me finish elaborating on that. On the left-hand side, we could very easily just say array list, and it's the exact same thing for us, for all intents and purposes. The other thing I'll kind of highlight is we technically don't have to put this over here. You could just leave it blank, and it'll kind of match it. What you will see on any type of FRQ, as we kind of saw here, right? The College Board will almost always include that. So I have my array list. Let's start adding download infos to it. So I'll take my download info list and add a new download info. We just need a title. And we're going to have to increment a couple of times to get it the way that we want. The reason being, why don't I just overload this constructor so that we can get to what we want, right? Because I'm going to have to increment Hey Jude 5 times and Aqualung 10 times. Hard pass on that. I'm going to go back into download info, and I will alt insert a constructor using both instance variables. That way, when we create our download info, we can do Hey Jude, and instead of having to do all that crazy increment, I can just pass in a 5 to get to the state that we want. We can add a new download info. This next one was called Soul Sister, and it had 3 times downloaded. Lastly, download list. We'll add Aqualung, obviously, hit song, destroying Hey Jude in the download charts. Ooh. 10, not 10. Okay, so I've populated an array list. I need to actually make a music downloads object using that. They didn't give us a way to, sorry, I scrolled right past it. They didn't actually give us a way to set that, did they? No. Okay. So I'm going to go into my music downloads, and we're going to overload this constructor and allow it so that we can take in an existing download list. So when I go to create my music downloads, which they actually give us a sample title, an example title. Sorry, I struggle with finding these things. Web and Music A. So I'll create music downloads, web, music A, and that is a new music downloads from this array list that I've created. Okay. Now let's test what we were actually trying to write, which is this method, get download info. Okay. If we look back at our examples, Aqualung is one. Let's try that. So back in my driver, I'm going to salt. We'll take our object. we're going to call get download info, passing in Aqualung. Now, I'm going to get some gibberish here just because we didn't write a toString, and we'll do that momentarily. So I right-clicked in free space, told it to run, and there's our gibberish, just because we're not overriding the toString method. So I'm going to, what I'm actually trying to print here is a download info object, right? We're trying to print a download info. So we'll go into download info, and we'll write a toString, public string toString. Right? Whenever we try to print an object, it is implicitly trying to call the toString. If we don't override it, we get gibberish like this. So we're going to just do it here at the point of return. All I'm going to do is return the title of our download info along with a number of times downloaded. It's just something simple. Okay, so now when I run my driver, I'm implicitly calling toString, and I should actually get information here, right? We're trying to print an object. There's an implicit call to toString. We now have a toString, and we see that Aqualung exists. If we look at another example where we try to look for happy birthday, right? I'm going to sout. I'll take web music A. We'll get download info on happy birthday. Happy birthday. And this one should give me back null if our method works correctly, and it does. That's looking pretty good for part A. Let's check out part B. Write the music downloads method update downloads, which takes a list of song titles as a parameter. For each title on the list, the method updates download list, either by incrementing the download count if download info object with the same title exists, or by adding a new download info object with that title and download count to 1 at the end of the list. Interesting. When a new download info object is added to the end of the list, the order of the already existing entries in the download list remains unchanged. For example, suppose we have web music B, and it refers to an instance of music downloads, and that table below is this. Interesting that we would call it web music B when it kind of just looks the same as web music A. Assume that the variable song titles, which is in a list, an array list, has been defined and contains the following entries. We got Lights, we got Aqualung, we got Soul Sister, Go Now, Lights, and Soul Sister. Now here's the thing. Lights isn't in here, so it should be a new entry that gets added. Aqualung is, and so all we're going to do with that is actually increment Aqualung. We got Soul Sister, which already exists. We want to increment that. Go Now would be a new entry. When we get back to Lights, well, we actually already added it, and so this should be incrementing, and then we're going to increment Soul Sister again. So we see the result down here. Soul Sister got incremented twice, here and here. Aqualung only got incremented one time. Lights got created and then later incremented, and then Go Now gets created. You got ideas? Let's pop over to our music downloads. I'm going to format this a little bit while y'all spit out some ideas in chat. There's our post condition. Should maybe end up putting our code somewhere where people can see it, steal it. And this one's going to be on a new line. That's how I tend to do it. Okay, so here's titles, which is coming in. My guess is probably two ways to look at it. You can loop through download list, or you can loop through titles. I'm guessing we want to loop through titles. Does it say anything about having to use part A? Maybe I should have kept reading. The call to web music, blah, 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 results in the following, blah, 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 blah. In writing your solution, you must use get download info. Assume that get download info works as specified, regardless of what you wrote for part A. So yes, we have to use the method we wrote in part A. Keep in mind, if it exists, we'll get an object back. If it does not, we'll get null back. So I want to loop through titles. And with each title, I'm going to ask for the download info. If I get back null, I know it doesn't exist and I should add it. If I get back something other than null, I know it's there and I need to increment it. So we're going to loop through titles. For each string title, which we'll refer to, in titles, for each string, which we'll refer to as title, in titles, I want to ask, does this thing already exist? Right? We can actually save the value returned from our method into a local variable. That's going to end up helping us. We have download info is equal to get download info title. Right? They give me an array list, but I'm looping through. With each iteration, I'm going to take the current title and try to get download info. Here I'm calling the get download info method in the same class up here. That is going to return a download info if it exists. Otherwise, I'm going to get back null. What it means is either this thing is a download info object and I've got the reference, or it is null. Regardless, it's saved in here, right? It is possible to save null into any object variable. What you're doing is basically saying that that object points to null in memory. I need to check this thing now. If download info is equal to null, well, guess what? That means that it didn't exist. And so I need to add it. We're going to add it to our download list, the instance variable. And by it, I mean the current title. We need to add to this array list a new download info object using this title. Now, the number of times downloaded is going to default to 0. Okay? If it doesn't exist, well, we're effectively in an else. That is the same thing as saying else download info does not equal null. It is some type of object, and this is how we can test. Now here I'm using relational operators because we're actually checking the pointer. We're asking, does this variable, this object variable, reference, in this case does not reference null? If this is true, what it means is we got a download info back out of there. So it exists. Now here's where things get tricky. Right? Ultimately, all of this is dealing with pointers. Right? This object, this download info, and the one that exists inside of the array list, it's the same one. Effectively, that spot in the array list is pointing at a download object. And then here, this local variable is pointing at the exact same object. What it means is all I have to do is take this object and tell it to increment. That'll effectively change it in the array list. It's the same object. I got 2 pointers referencing it. Okay? So we're looping through all of the titles in our titles array list. I'm going to ask, does the title exist in our download list array list? And the way that I do that is using the get download info. We save it into this local variable. If it's null, that means it's not there, so I'm going to add it. Okay? Otherwise, meaning it does exist, there's one that's already there, we just need to increment it. And I do that for everything. I believe this is it. We're going to test this. I may be missing something. Now, one of the things that's going to get tricky is, or what maybe appears tricky, you may be overthinking, is this light situation. Now, here's the thing. When I come across this first lights, we would try to get the download info. We would get back null. And so we would add it. The next time that I try to get lights, right? We would get the download info for lights. Well, in this case, it would exist because I had added it previously in the loop. And so then I would increment the times downloaded. This is why I think this is just it. So I'm going to use Web Music A because it's the exact same situation. These are inconsequential at this point, so let's just comment those out. And so what we want to do is let's create this array list here. Ooh. I might be able to do something kind of fancy. You ready for this? Is equal to this. Thank you. We'll use an initializer list there. Now, ultimately, I need an array list. So let's create a list of string. And I'll use what's in their example, song titles. So we create song titles. That is a new array list of string. And we're going to loop through the array, adding each to our array list. Now there's some collection stuff in here that could help us, but this is easy enough. For each string, song title in temp, we'll do song titles with an S dot add song title, the individual song. And that's it. I'm taking it from an initializer list and adding it to our array list. The reason we're doing this is we don't exactly have an initializer list equivalent. The closest thing would be collections, and we could, I could have just maybe done that. Let me show you what that would look like. I could create my song titles array list and then just do collections.addAll to song titles, these bad boys. Now this method, addAll, it's from the collections class, a utility class. This is a static method. I know because we did not create a collections object. IntelliJ is telling me because it's italicized, but it's using variable arguments. We're adding to this array list any number of, in this case, strings. Maybe that's what we should have done. Let's clean this up. It is song title. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I'm just populating this thing. We could print it off if you want to see it. Now what I want to do is take our Web Music A and I want to update downloads. I'm going to pass in our song titles. That has a return type of void. It's not printing anything. And so in order to see the after effect, I'm going to need some type of toString maybe. Let's see what this looks like. I'm probably just going to, that's probably fine. So we first create a music downloads with this state. That is the initial state here, right? It's 3 songs, Hey Jude, Soul Sister, Aqualung. We then are going to pass in these song titles and it should update, and this should be our end result. Why don't we do a before and after just to kind of prove that we got something good going here. Let's take Web Music A. Let's print off Web Music A. We'll update the downloads and then we'll print off Web Music A again. This is going to make an implicit call to toString. That is Web Music A.toString, which I wrote a toString this time, so we're not going to get gibberish. Let's right click in free space, tell it to run. Here is my music downloads. The instance variable download list consists of Hey Jude, Soul Sister, and Aqualung. Afterwards, it is Hey Jude, Soul Sister, which is at 5 now because there were 2 counts. Aqualung, which is at 11 because there's a count here. And lastly, lights. Ooh. So one thing I did not do is increment the download. This is an oversight on my behalf. We are creating the objects, but it defaults to 0, and they wanted us to actually count that as a download. So let's flip back to our music downloads. It's a good thing we tested that. So whenever I create this object, I also need to increment it. Now I'll show you a two-part approach, which is what I would expect, is instead of just making it here anonymously, we actually create a download info variable. Sure. And it is set to this. So I'm going to make the object, save it into a variable. Let's then take it and increment it. Just always increment. That's actually probably pretty good. And then we do all of this before we add, and we only do this if it doesn't exist. Download info 1. Let's try our driver again with these changes. So again, we're looping through our titles. We're going to try to get the download info. That'll give us back an object if it exists. If it doesn't exist, we'll get back null. So if I get null, I want to create the new download info. I want to increment it before adding it to our array list. I'm going to try that, Chase, but I don't think so, because here's the thing. So what I was thinking, and what Chad is thinking as well, is whenever we go to create the object here, could we create it, right? This is making it and then adding it. What if we made it and then incremented it? And you see, this is mad. The reason this is mad is because I'm calling this method, but the method's return type is void. And so with this syntax, it looks like I'm trying to add to my download list void. And that's ultimately why this doesn't work. I feel like there's some workarounds in here somewhere, but I'm going to leave it as the approach that most people would probably do. Oh, just always increment. No, this is still null down here. No, one of the suggestions was we get rid of the else, and so we just always increment, but this is referring to the current download info, not the new one that I'm making. Maybe this should be a more explicit variable, like a new download, because that variable name is a little bit misleading. So if I got rid of the else here, right, and we just always increment, what we're always incrementing is download info. Well, it's possible that it's null, so that won't quite work. And download it in the actual constructor, increment it by 1. I mean, that's not really how this works. See, the problem with it, I don't want to do that because we've effectively added stuff here. This constructor for download info was given to us, but it wasn't shown. They tell it, oh, wait, no, it's supposed to be set to 1. Thank you. Reading comprehension. So we don't have to do this. We don't have to do any of this. It's supposed to be set to 1 whenever we create it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is why we should read everything. Let's try it again. We had to change a 0 to a 1. But we got there. Thank you, chat. Let's chill.